The following is produced by 5 Star Productions USA, which is solely responsible for its editorial content and is sponsored in part by a grant from Paul Mitchell Salon Hair Care.
You sometimes feel like you can't win? We seal our houses to maximize the energy spent on heat and air conditioning, but because of all the chemicals, plastics, and synthetic fibers around, the indoor air pollution can be 100 times worse than the air outside. Hi, I'm Begley Jr., and this is today's Environment. Come along with us as we search for answers in a world full of environmental questions.
It's time we get tough on trash. On average, half of what we throw out could be recycled. Now, fortunately, there are solutions to this senseless waste of resources. Here's one now.
The waste piled up higher and higher and higher. California was generating 45 million tons of garbage each year, enough to cover a 4-lane highway with 6 feet of compacted trash from the Oregon border to Mexico. And it was growing. Projections estimated an annual 54 million tons a year by the turn of the century. The future was crystal clear. There would never be enough landfill space. There was only one thing left to do. California declared a war on waste. The secret weapons: reduce, reuse, recycle, and some legislation with teeth sharper than jaws. Since 1990, all across California, an all-out war on waste has been waged. Directed by the Integrated Waste Management Board, California's mandated goal is to reduce solid waste disposal by 50% by the year 2000. The all-encompassing strategy takes aim at every possible source of waste: homes, hospitals, prisons, colleges, offices, restaurants, retail stores, farms, and factories. An intensive environmental education program, Closing the Loop, even gets children from kindergarten through high school involved and active in the challenge. A multilingual outreach program bridges California's many different cultures and ethnicities and unites them in the effort. So far, the battle is showing bright promise. By 1995, it was clear waste was on the retreat, and the halfway mark of cutting the yearly load by 25% had been cleared. But reaching the ultimate goal of a 50% cut in waste by the new millennium is still a weighty challenge. At the household level, grass cycling, backyard composting, and curbside collection of recyclables are decreasing trash tonnage dramatically. Recycling paper, aluminum, glass, steel, construction debris, appliances, tires, and plastic eliminates tons of waste headed to landfills. Educational programs teach the proper way to handle and dispose of household hazardous waste and used oil. The challenges of the future depend on how we conduct ourselves in the present. If we can learn to cut waste now, precious resources and dwindling landfill space can be conserved for another day.
Did you know that by recycling one aluminum can, you're saving about enough energy to run your television set for about 3 hours? One empty can could be your ticket to watch the Super Bowl. Get involved with today's environment today.
Too much trash, but too few landfills. Nearly every state in the nation faces a similar challenge right now. But the key to successful recycling may lie in boosting demand.
In theory, it sounds simple: reduce, reuse, recycle. But in practice, what in the world do you do with all the reusable and recyclable materials? Well, answering that question is the key to making any all-encompassing waste reduction program work. By using waste studies and other technical assistance guides, the California Integrated Waste Management Board attempts to help local governments and businesses learn to reduce their amount of garbage. The board also teaches how to identify, separate, and properly reuse or collect recyclable materials. It all helps keep the loads destined for landfills to a minimum. But California quickly realized that this was only part of the solution. Many local governments and business owners did not know where or how to market their recyclables. So the board created 40 recycling market development zones similar to federal enterprise zones, and now makes $5 million a year in loans to recycling businesses. CALMAX, an exchange that brings buyers and sellers of recyclables together, was introduced. To help close the loop, a Buy Recycled program was established to get state agencies on board with environmentally aware purchasing practices. Establishing an efficient market can help make the theory of recycling an economical practice. In many cases, savings come from less frequent garbage collection, and an incoming revenue stream is generated from the sale of recyclables. Turning recyclables into products also helps create jobs. California's programs are helping the nation view recyclable materials as commodities, just like pork bellies and soybeans. In fact, the Chicago Board of Trade now deals in recyclable materials, including glass, steel, and paper. Because commercial waste contributes to over 50% of the garbage in California, diverting resources back into the open market is an absolute necessity for the state's waste reduction goal to be reached and the landfills to be spared for future use. Ongoing research, experimentation, and innovation continues to strive for more and better ways to put old materials to new uses. Landfill space is at a premium in California and everywhere else on Earth. Even if it was abundant, we can no longer afford to toss out perfectly good resources and bury them in the ground. If leading-edge waste reduction programs can teach school kids about composting with worms, help Hollywood studios give their movie set discards to eager civic groups, and sponsor composting demonstrations on farms, well, maybe we can bolster demand for our so-called waste and turn the trash headed for the landfill into a vanishing commodity. Many popular innovations start in California. Hopefully, a statewide effort to reduce, reuse, and recycle will turn into a trend that sweeps the nation and captivates the world.
In a moment, on Today's Environment, California's war on waste and the recycling programs for profit, both next. Litter bugs. We tend to see them everywhere, don't we? They throw their trash on the ground or in the water. They damage the environment, and they often kill wildlife. This next idea may help exterminate that behavior.
It's careless. It's ugly. It harms our community. Every year, unthinking people toss tons of unsightly litter and trash into the environment. This disgrace is much more than an eyesore. The reckless behavior contributes to all kinds of pollution and can seriously affect the well-being of wildlife, as well as destroy the fabric of our communities. Fortunately, many people do care. During the past decade, millions of volunteers have taken the time to go out and pick up the trash that others have left behind. It's part of the GLAAD Bagathon program, sponsored by the makers of GLAAD trash bags in partnership with Keep America Beautiful Incorporated and local communities all across the nation. Already, this program has removed over 133 million pounds of trash and recyclables from public lands and communities, and grown into the largest organized cleanup and recycling effort in the United States. Each spring, Bagathon program cities across America work together to address their individual goals. Support and materials are provided to local organizations, including trash bags, banners, posters, caps, and educational information. The most recent program involved more than 90 cities, 1,400 local organizations, and attracted over 1 million volunteers. More than 22 million pounds of trash and recyclables were eliminated from the mountains, to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam.
The impact of litter within an area is much greater than just the appearance of that area. Studies have shown that litter contributes to things like higher crime rates and other social ills. And conversely, when litter is cleaned up, other positive things can happen in that area, and it really equates to the fact that a cleaner environment will be a safer environment.
The enormous tonnage of waste isn't simply collected and hauled to a landfill. Anything that can be recycled, including clothing, gets separated and sent to the proper facility. GLAAD and Keep America Beautiful are the winning combination for a healthy environment and a more sustainable community.
We've got people out there who care about their communities, and this is a good way to bring everybody together to get them to help clean up our environment.
The people who participate in this program may be called volunteers, but they're truly heroes.
Bagathon is 10 years old. We're going into the second decade now, so we anticipate the help of even more Americans across this country to team up to clean up their communities. Education of our children is very important in today's world, and if we're going to expect our children to help take care of our environment later on in life, we've got to teach them now.
Recycle one bottle and you could save enough energy to run a 100-watt bulb for about 4 hours. Now that's a bright idea. Recycle and get involved with today's environment today.
What would you do with 250,000 pounds of paper? Well, every year this country goes through about that much for every man, woman, and child. 69 million tons. It kind of makes you want to recycle more, doesn't it?
You know, it never fails. Give a child an expensive toy, and they like the box. Maybe the children already know something we're now learning. A corrugated box may be one of the most useful resources on the planet. It's almost infinitely recyclable, and every time one goes through the recycling loop, it represents a savings in trees, energy, and pollution.
The thought kind of builds your respect for a simple box, doesn't it? Who would expect such a common commodity to be such an environmental hero? But now that you know, you should never throw one in the trash.
Some paper manufacturers, like the Menominee Paper Company, have been recycling corrugated boxes, cardboard boxes, and other waste paper for over 20 years now. They use only recycled fiber and recycle almost 200,000 tons of waste paper every year. In doing so, they provide an essential source of raw material rather than add to the growth of landfills. But the environmental stewardship doesn't stop at recycling. A company-wide pollution prevention program has found beneficial uses for over 90% of the company waste, eliminated the use of ozone-depleting substances in its process, and pioneered state-of-the-art wastewater treatment technology to help preserve the vitality of the surrounding environment. It can be a closed-loop process. Old corrugated containers and other paper waste enter the system where they get recycled into containers, paper tubing, or display units. After a useful life, the paper products can return for recycling again and a whole new use.
Used paper. It's a precious resource that shouldn't be sentenced to a landfill. Alliances with municipal recycling programs and waste paper brokers ensure that paper mills will always have plenty of this recyclable raw material to manufacture their recycled product.
This logo means the product is made from recycled fiber. And this logo means the product is recyclable. The two together represent a closed loop from cradle to grave. So maybe the reason the children always like to play with the box so much is because they sense it's a real hero in preserving the planet for their generation and beyond.
New fuel additives for combustion and diesel engines. Both can aid in the fight for cleaner air. Next on Today's Environment. Clean air, or freedom of the highway. Did you know that nearly 2/3 of all smog-forming chemicals are produced by our automobiles? Now, if we want to sustain the planet, well, we better learn to drive a little cleaner.
The tyranny of the tailpipe. Air pollution from automobiles may be responsible for over 120,000 premature deaths each year. The blame lies on the combustion engine. Our way of life depends on this form of transportation, and for that unrestricted mobility, we pay dearly with our clean air. Many look to electric vehicles or alternative fuels for the answer. Those options may be part of the solution in the future. However, they will not solve the emission problems compounded by today's rush hour. Rather than wait for new technologies and entirely new supporting infrastructures to be built, many researchers and scientists are taking a hard look at the technology we have, combustion engines and fossil fuels, and finding ways to make them cleaner. One possibility may come from a fuel additive called MMT, developed and manufactured by the Ethyl Corporation. When added to unleaded gasoline, MMT can enhance the fuel so that it burns more completely. Since emissions are increased by incomplete combustion of the fuel, using an additive that enhances the combustion can reduce total emissions. Extensive testing has also indicated that MMT may improve the efficiency of emission control systems. In the fight for cleaner air, however, many people focus solely on the emissions from combustion engines that run on refined fossil fuels. But the refining process that can turn a low-grade crude into a high-octane gasoline also produces potentially harmful emissions. The more processing required for changing the crude oil into gasoline generally translates to more emissions being released into the atmosphere. Since MMT can be blended with gasoline while raising the octane level without additional refining, total refinery emissions can be reduced, and the energy required to power the process can be conserved. The use of the additive can often increase process yields, which could even help us stretch our oil resources a little further. Like it or not, the combustion engine will remain our primary source of transportation for at least the next several years. So, if we can use additives to help reduce emissions from the refining and combustion of automobile fuels, then we might be able to get a lot more mileage out of our favorite planet.
The diesel engine. Trucks, buses, even locomotives primarily use diesel fuels, and that exhaust and smoke contains harmful pollutants. But fortunately, there are ways to clean them up.
They belch. They stink. They pollute our air. Every year, diesel engines on trucks, buses, and even trains release tons of harmful pollutants into our atmosphere. The diesel fuel used in the United States has a CTAE number, or quality rating, which ranks with the lowest grade diesel fuels in the world. It's little wonder that diesel exhaust has helped foul the air over our cities so much that right now, over 80 million Americans live in areas that exceed ozone pollution standards set by the EPA. Every day, researchers and scientists continue their attempt to reduce the environmental impact of diesel fuels. One possible solution may be provided by a cetane improver, a fuel additive developed by the Ethyl Corporation. By raising the cetane number of the diesel fuel, the additive improves the fuel quality. Higher quality fuel often translates to better engine performance. It has been shown that when the cetane number is increased, engine exhaust may have less hydrocarbon, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and particulate emissions. Improving diesel emissions and smoke is important, but using cetane improver can often do more for clean air than that. It can help reduce total refinery emissions because it can eliminate certain steps in the refining process. The result is the elimination of additional emission-heavy refining that may be necessary to otherwise bring diesel fuels up to the right quality. The cetane improver also helps increase the amount of diesel fuel available from a barrel of crude and can simplify refinery storage and logistics. The world's air quality situation is a difficult, complex problem with no single solution. Products that can help reduce emissions from the refining and consumption of fossil fuels can play an important role in the quest for cleaner air. As citizens on an Earth with limited resources, we owe it to ourselves and future generations to stretch our oil reserves and preserve our clean air. Alternatives that allow us to do this should be explored and developed, because if we can reduce the toll of our addiction to combustion, well, we may rehabilitate the troubled air over our cities and breathe easy once again.
Radon is the invisible odorless gas released when uranium breaks down the soil. According to specialists at the Environmental Defense Fund, radon in the home is the most deadly environmental health hazard in America today. Getting a home radon check may be a good idea, and I hope this show made you aware of a few more good ideas. Join me again next time as we explore more environmental solutions on today's environment.
This has been a presentation of 5 Star Productions USA. The preceding program was sponsored in part by a grant from Paul Mitchell Salon Hair Care.